Hello, and welcome to the Happy Hour with Teresa Greco. On the Happy Hour, you're going to have a very different experience than the traditional happy hour you might have at a bar or restaurant. Here on the Happy Hour is where you will learn about the principles and practices that lead to true inner happiness, which is unwavering, in abundance, and is not dependent on you buying, earning, achieving, searching, or doing anything to be happy. A huge weight can be lifted off of your shoulders when you know there is a part of you that is always happy. You just need to make time to connect with it. On the show, my guests and I explore the latest physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being practices, and together we'll advise you on the actionable steps you can take toward a happier, more fulfilled, authentic life. On the show today, we'll be discussing the importance of balance and how achieving and maintaining balance in our lives is paramount importance to our happiness. Balance is where all aspects of our being, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, are harmoniously aligned. It is the art of finding the middle ground, avoiding extremes, and nurturing a sense of wholeness within ourselves and our connection to the world. So, if you say yes to any of the following questions, I invite you to stay with me for today's show. Number one, do you often find yourself stretched too thin in your personal and professional life? Do you feel rudderless and lack purpose in projects that once excited you? Do you often feel stressed, overwhelmed, and irritated? Have you had multiple burnouts in your life and maybe never fully recovered from the first one? My guest today is a psychologist and psychotherapist who, after experiencing a breaking point in his own long and successful career, became a leadership and mindset coach to support other ambitious individuals to reclaim balance and purpose in their lives. I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Matt Shorrock. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Teresa. Thank you. And thank you for having me.
So, Dr. Matt, why don't you tell everybody where you're coming in from today?
I'm based in Austria, and I've been living here now for the past 9 years, although you may detect from my accent that I'm from the UK originally. So, yeah, no, I'm sitting here on a fine Austrian summer's day with the wind blowing and the sun shining.
Sounds glorious. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Now, you've recently written a book entitled The Balanced Entrepreneur, where the readers discover the transformative power of balance and how to utilize it as a potent magnet for success and well-being. Now, I presented the audience with a series of questions that were taken from the back of your book to reflect on whether their life is balanced. So in your experience, what does imbalance look like in our lives?
I suppose it shows up in lots of different ways, but the short answer would be a real difficulty to process stress. So, and when we struggle to process stress, it really sort of knocks our energy sideways. So that's how it may manifest for some people. They feel very low energy and exhausted. They may sort of withdraw from within their work, but also in their relationships, and ultimately, from themselves as well. So they may feel a sense of disconnection with themselves, like depersonalized, and they may find themselves critical of themselves and others, and a sense of despair and hopelessness. So lots of different ways, and I would also add as well, like a sense of rudderlessness, feeling lost, lacking purpose in work or in relationships and in life in general.
Now, maybe if you could share a little bit about the people that you work with, because you have lots of different credentials and you've done lots of different things. So maybe if you give us a bit of your background as to, how you do the work that you do, then it'll also give us perspective as to the clients and your understanding of how stress and overwhelm has really been a part of the lives of the people that you support.
Okay, so we can go back a few decades because I've been in the helping professions for that long, and so I got into the psychology world quite early in my life. Started as a teen, and then trained as a counselor. So my first work was in the bereavement service. So, sort of on a practical level as a funeral assistant, but I gravitated towards working with the bereaved, and soon found that even though I had a degree in psychology, I was very much out of my depth sometimes with some of the bereaved, especially those who had lost children or there was a sudden loss within the family. So that really sort of spurred my interest in discovering more about the human condition. And so I trained as a counselor and then as a psychotherapist. And then it goes on. So I trained as a psychologist and then as a coach. But I suppose one of the areas I've always pivoted around is the distress, how people struggle to cope with stress and that sense of being lost in the world. And so a big part of my career was working with people with addictions. So for a lot of people who struggle to regulate their emotions and don't feel so connected with themselves, they'll develop maladaptive strategies to try and attend to those feelings and lean into various addictions, whatever they may be, like sort of like porn or shopping or social media. So it was interesting because the more credentials, as you say, the more credentials I collected and the more time I invested in developing myself professionally and personally, I realized I was spending hundreds of thousands on myself and had to charge fees commensurate with how much I'd invested. So I was reaching with what I was charging, I was attracting a different type of personality. And it was people who were high functioning, but not quite struggling at work. So it tended to be leaders and entrepreneurs. And the psychological work that we were doing was actually benefiting not just them, but their teams. So I found inadvertently I was treating the organization. And in recent years, we've learned so much more about burnout. And one of the ways in which some people will attend to burnout is by, they'll develop addictions. So when I look back over my career, being highly specialized in addictions was just part of a bigger syndrome, the bigger burnout syndrome. And so it's equipped me quite well to work with, in more recent years in supporting people in the leadership world and the entrepreneurship world. There is so much more I could say, but I hope that goes some way to answering your question.
Thank you. Because your book is entitled The Balanced Entrepreneur. And so is the book more geared towards that clientele? Or I like to think that many of us, that entrepreneurship can show up in a variety of different forms. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're running, a multi-million-dollar company and, only those people are entrepreneurs. That that even in young children, that we can see entrepreneurship coming with just like a paper route or a lemonade stand, or, the different ways that they try to, bring in some income by thinking independently, thinking about a problem and them trying to solve it. So the title of your book, if you want to maybe talk to how you feel what an entrepreneur is and who exactly you're speaking to in the book.
It's funny. I started off writing for the entrepreneur, and it actually could be picked up by anybody who's experiencing stress, burnout, or overwhelm, and is feeling lost. So it is. I did battle with myself over the title. Should I stay with entrepreneur? So should I stay true to using the term entrepreneur? I decided to in the end, because I'd written so much, for the entrepreneur. But as I was like 3/4 of the way through, and I was beginning to sort of reflect on the process of writing the book, which was actually 2.5 years of my life, and it started sort of around, in the middle of the pandemic, and at around when I was a time when I was losing somebody very close to me who had burnt out, So, and it was my mum, I don't mind saying, and she was no entrepreneur, but she had a lot of the traits of an entrepreneur. So she had that grit, determination, that spirit. And so the book is as much for people who are non-entrepreneurs as entrepreneurs. So when I've looked more deeply at the research into burnout, there are certain people that are predisposed to burnout, and they tend to be healers or people in the helping professions. So I call them healers, dealers, and leaders. So this kind of like trinity of people, and what unites this particular group is that they lean towards putting other people first. So people going into the helping professions, they're focused on attending to other people's needs, and they're not so good at attending to their own, and they lose themselves in that process. So even though the book is entitled The Balanced Entrepreneur, it is as much for leaders, healers, and you name it, the mums of the world, parents of the world,
exactly.
Because we're all, the syndrome doesn't discriminate. That's the thing.
Yes, that's true. Now, do you have any stats around how stress is affecting, I don't know whether it be like North America or Europe or certain countries? How prevalent is overwhelm, burnout, and stress?
It's especially at this time in our in the world, like post-pandemic, we're still collecting figures for the actual impact of that it's had on us all. And so I'm looking forward to seeing those being collated. We were chatting before, and a lot of the figures have been skewed anyway, because people that have been who have died through COVID, it's not on their death certificate. So it's going to be really difficult to ascertain the actual figures, statistically speaking. But I think one thing's for sure, and we've all seen this. People who have been, post-pandemic, there's been a mental health crisis, and people in the book I talk about the big existential pause button being pressed. We were all invited to sort of think about our lives. Everything just stopped, and in that space, many of us questioned what are we doing here? What are we doing with our lives? And I think I for one, am quite grateful for, the pandemic having happened, because if there's one silver lining, it's enabled us to really sort of think for ourselves and to think, deeply about what it is that we want, what our needs are, and what our deeper purpose is.
Mm-hmm. I think it's true. I think that it did provide a reset. And for the people that you support, imagine like what a rude awakening it would have been for people that were so living on autopilot in their work, experiencing a lot of the stress and overwhelm, but so caught up in it that it's difficult to get out of it, right? How do you step out of it without everything just maybe falling apart? And that the pandemic and the lockdowns and everything that was involved with that forcibly made people do that. And so do you think that this is often what happens, that things come to a head or it comes to some kind of event or crossroad that then forces people to really look at how the imbalance in their life, whether it be like they're at work way too much and their personal lives are suffering, or, they've been taken so far away in a particular area, right? That we know we can't just support our physical well-being without looking at the other aspects, that we do need a sense of balance where all aspects of ourselves are being taken care of and nurtured. And that if we're only, most of our time is spent in this one area, then other aspects of our lives are going to end up suffering consequences for that. So do you think that that's often what happens, that we're so caught up in the stress and the overwhelm that it feels then difficult for us to get out of it and we don't even know the way out?
Yeah, I think this is why it was such a busy time for people like me, for coaches and psychotherapists and guides, because people were lost. They were thrown into this conundrum, this existential conundrum, and realizing that a lot of their needs were being met like through work, or were apparently being met through work, but not really, or not as well as they could be. But it still opened up a space where they were left to question. And for example, a lot of people, they value it's like conditions of worth. They show up in work and they've got status at work. They receive lots of attention and appraisal. And when having to work from home and they're not able to receive praise and recognition, for example, for helping others. Before I was talking about, people in the helping professions, or leaders, being there to serve. But when there's nobody there to serve, and we've built an identity around it, then it throws us into a big wobble, an imbalance, which brings people knocking on the doors of people like me, and so they're wanting to sort of make meaning in their life, or find meaning, or reconnect with meaning, because that often there was a time when they felt more natural and within themselves, and somehow they've lost their path.
So I feel like oftentimes it is those crossroad moments, whether it be, loss in some way of a relationship or a person, or loss of a job, or an illness, or an accident, or something like that, that causes people to take a step back and reevaluate. But I hope through our discussion today that it's not going to take those type of scenarios like a pandemic to cause people to take that step back. That I hope through our discussion that we'll be able to talk about the ways that this sense of imbalance creeps up, that it shows up as dis-ease in our physical, mental, emotional self that we're not conscious of because we've been under it for a long time. That's all we know, that we're just so in it, that we live very much in fight or flight mode all the time, that we're not even aware that we're not breathing properly, that we're always constantly under some kind of stress, but it's become normalized for us, right? So I don't want it to have to be something super dramatic and unfortunate in order for us to wake up to how we're living our lives, but to be able to very sensitively become consciously aware of when our lives are not in balance, how it's affecting us. So I want to be able to, through our discussion, as I said, for people to be aware to say, well, mostly my life is fine, but actually maybe mostly it's not, because you're not even aware of how it's actually affecting the different areas of yourself, not just how is it affecting your professional life or even your life at home, but how is it affecting your whole being? That oftentimes we're not listening to the communication of our bodies. We're not listening to how our physical body, mental, emotional bodies are communicating with us to really pick up and hone in on the cues of that communication that is there alerting us that we are out of balance.
Yes.
And then when we're out of balance, how can we go to work and have a balanced approach with the people that we're engaging with, or at home, if this vessel that we're in is out of balance? So there's almost like two parts to this, about how it's affecting us personally and then how it's affecting us in our outside or outer lives.
Yes. It's interesting as I hear you talk about, breathing, we even forget to breathe properly. And it's something that I address in my book as one of the first ports of call. So there's like a system within the book on how to bring ourselves back into alignment, or to bring balance back into our lives. And the first component, oddly enough, is called breathe. And I play on the word breathe because it's if we're going to become more self-aware, then first of all we need to breathe. I talk about, as the second component, awakening, but first of all breathe, right? And breathe properly. And there's lots of different ways to breathe, and so I lean into sort of like breathing patterns from the ancient wisdom of Sanskrit and Hinduism. All that's there and available for us. But when we allow ourselves to practice breathing, we then connect with our body. We begin to hear those little whispers, or those little aches and pain, feel those little aches and pains, or that higher wisdom speaking to us. And so that's one aspect of breathing that I dive into, but also taking breathers. I don't know if you use this colloquialism in Canada, this idea. So, and breathers at a micro level, like within work, just taking 5, just to go for a little walk around and stretch your legs. And to taking holidays, but to taking sabbaticals, I would call that sort of that like a meta level breather, where we begin to sort of question, what are we doing with our lives, and to connect, question, are we engaging, or are we meeting all of our needs, sort of mind, body, and spirit. Yeah, but we've got to consciously create these breathing spaces for that, and that's not easy. When we've got responsibilities and children and staff and teams to take care of, and bills and what have you. So it does we have to be really intentional about breathing and taking breathers.
And sometimes I'm sure with the people that you work with, they actually have to schedule it in because they are so busy. So they have to put into their schedule that they're, I don't know, going for a walk, being out in nature, or exercising, or are there particular activities that you find are more invigorating than others, that really, even though you may not have to spend a lot of time doing it, but there are huge benefits, like breathing? Absolutely. Just, in a minute of deep breathing, it can totally reset the nervous system. So, I mean, that is like so quick and easy to do, and only takes a minute, right?
Yes.
But are there other particular practices that you find offer that reset and have huge benefits?
Yes. It reminds me, as you asked the question, the first one that pops up for me personally, as a committed practitioner of it, but also now for my clients, because I can't sort of speak more highly of the benefits of this. And this is like cold water immersion. And so for the busiest of people, we can all spare like a couple of minutes just to step under a cold shower or sit in a cold bath. And it's a real hack. It's a real reset, on so many different levels. If we've got lots of stress in the body, it just enables us at a physiological level to wash out, to release lots of neurotransmitters that are going to serve as well, like norepinephrine, which is an antidepressant. And it just helps create a sense of stillness and calm that lasts for hours. If we allow ourselves just to sort of hack into our own chemistry set. And so there's one that I've tried and tested and looked into the research, and it's really quite compelling, the benefit of it for so many people now. And Wim Hof has popularized it in recent years. But actually, we can trace it back to the Romans. They were practicing this thousands of years ago. It's only in recent years we've started to warm our water and to take hot baths, which are beneficial. But we've lost the benefits of the cold bathing.
And it's amazing how our body is a pharmacy in itself. That, as you said, being able to hack our bodies, or know these hacks that have huge benefits when we do them, but we're not familiar with them, right? How to be able to elicit the natural production of certain like happiness hormones in the body, or endorphins, through particular activities that actually are a natural way of eliciting these highs, without having to turn to substances to do them. So, but if you don't have access to a cold shower at work, what else can you maybe do?
At work, I mean, mindfulness is the other obvious state that you can place yourself in. Just become much more present-centered. Just allow yourself like a minute just to engage with the here and now. I think there's lots said about mindfulness, and people mean different things by it, but even in its simplest form, just become much more present-centered and allow yourself just to sometimes just close your eyes. I call it sensory rest. Rest the senses, and just allow yourself to engage other senses just for a few seconds. And, if you, there's this other idea of subjective units of distress, which you might know as just quantify how you're feeling on a scale of 1 to 10, or SUDs, subjective units of distress. And if you take a SUD measurement, before you close your eyes, and then 1 minute later, you can detect a qualitative shift. And people will try to talk themselves out of not taking those moments. I'm too busy, I'm too tired, there's so much to do, it doesn't work. But it's just the mind chatter, it's the monkey mind speak. Oh, go on, Teresa.
No, that we have to acknowledge that it's never done, right? That, and through our discussion too, we were talking about that it's really about the process, that it is about the journey and not the end goal. That when we get to the end goal, now we might celebrate for, maybe a couple days, and then we're like, now what? So we are in this constant path or journey that if we're not enjoying the process and we're not taking those moments along the way to just reset, then I can understand how it feels like it's never going to get done, because it's not, just because of how we're designed, and there's always like something else that we want to move on to. So I think it's important for us to like recognize that, as you said, we make excuses to say, well, I can't because this and that, but just know that in the future, you're going to be in that same position again. You're just, working on a different project, but in that same position. So when is it ever going to be a good time? To just stop and pause.
You talk about people spending some time celebrating, but a lot of people, they deny themselves that moment of celebration, and so that they're constantly in the process of and feeling unfulfilled, because I suppose if to use the mountain metaphor, some people they self-sabotage from getting to the top of the mountain. They never get to the top. Something that they create obstacles that prevent them from getting to the top. And other people do get to the top, but they don't stop to celebrate. And then they're off again, because the vista opens up and they see the next mountain, maybe a bigger mountain, and but not pausing, not taking a moment to reset, or just to take in the moment. I mentioned before, we were chatting before about a book that I've been reading called the Bhagavad Gita, which underpins a lot of the Buddhist philosophy and Hinduism. And there's a lovely section in there about teaching us the value of not attaching to the outcome. And so it says we're entitled to work, but not the outcome of our work. And by that, I take it's healthiest to become almost obsessed with the process, staying balanced, enjoying the moments. Whether we reap the fruits of our labor, it's almost a happy byproduct if we do, but the real joy is in the process.
And just tying into the happiness that many people will say, where happiness is a destination or some point in the future, where I won't be happy until I pay off my mortgage. I won't be happy until I get that promotion at work. I won't be happy until I find that perfect person. I won't be happy until, and that, again, we're in this process of working towards something, and we will only be able to award ourselves that sense of happiness and fulfillment once we arrive at that point. But, as we're saying, there is always like that next point, or in some cases, people sabotage it so they never arrive at that point as well, because, oh no, what would it mean when I get to that point? Then what? So it's important that, as you said, to be in the present moment, that happiness is always found now. And if we are enjoying the process every single day, and that we hope that people are engaged in activities that actually make them happy, that even though they're working, and okay, fine, we're not at the beach on vacation, but at least we're engaged in a process that actually does bring us joy and a sense of meaning and purpose on some level.
Yes. It's interesting you talk about the until, in transactional analysis, which is a school of psychotherapy. They talk about the until script. I won't be happy until. And it's based on the idea that something good can't happen until something less good has been completed. So it's and that will manifest in language in our minds. Like I can't be happy until I can't go out with friends until I've just cleaned the kitchen first of all, or at a sort of like a more instant level. But also I can't be happy, and or my rewards will lie in the next life. It's so they displace their own happiness a whole lifetime in the belief that next life they'll be able to reap the rewards, which is a missed opportunity, to put it lightly.
Now, if we bring this to the understanding that we are spirits first, so I live my life that I am a spiritual being having a human experience. And so what you just said reminded me of that, to say, here I am in the human experience, and maybe not appreciating what that experience is bringing me, but also living one where it's not happy, right? That we actually came here to live our happiest life. And not that that means that we're not going to have certain challenges along the way that are designed there really to teach us more about ourselves, where we have the opportunity to learn more about who we really are through the various challenges. But for the most part, that we had a path that we wanted to live, and then life pulls us away, and then maybe we're in jobs that we don't really enjoy because it's allotting us, money that's paying for a lifestyle that we want to have, but then even in that whole process isn't really making us happy, even though we're working super hard to pay for things that we think are going to make us happy. And so if we have to think about like that aspect of us being spirits first, and acknowledging the innate qualities that come with that part of us. So that part of us is always loving, at peace, and happy.
Yes.
Loving, at peace, and happy. So I'm just going to emphasize the at peace, because I feel like imbalance highlights the fact that we're not at peace. Because when we're feeling a sense of peace, we're not feeling stressed, we're not feeling overwhelmed, we're not feeling lost, we're not feeling any of the negative emotions.
Yeah.
And so if we think about how do we tie that aspect, how do we use that part of ourselves, because that part is always nourishing us, is always being able to, it actually can pour into the other aspects if we allow it to. So how do we acknowledge that part and then use it also to help us to gain more balance in our life?
As I heard you speaking, it made me think about the goals that people set for themselves, and I call them apparent goals and actual goals. I use this terminology in the book because one speaks to what we think we want, and the other one speaks to what really the spirit wants or what the spirit needs, and it's more aligned with ourself. And so actual goals are always values congruent, the congruent with our values, the very our beliefs that sort of inform that define us, that make us who we are. And I think we become imbalanced when we're chasing goals that aren't aligned with who we really are. And so when people that I work with come to me, I invite them to express what their goals are, but then to revisit and closely examine, okay, so fine. So you want the big house, you want to, so tell me why is that important to you? And so it opens up a conversation about, what really nourishes them, why they're driven. And we can get into talking about the self and the spirit, even though the goal might be presented first materialistically, that's leading them to burnout and what have you.
Mm. Now, it's interesting that when, we started our conversation, that I asked you, how does imbalance show up in our lives? What are some of the ways that looks like? And you mentioned this sense of lack of purpose and rudderlessness, you said. And so is that often not only just every day how you might feel physiologically with that overwhelm, which for me shows up in like really like sore shoulders up here, like that saying, you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders right away. When I have piled on way too many things on my schedule to do, it all hurts here. My neck hurts, my shoulders hurt. Some people it's lower back, right? Which signifies that they have no support with what it is that they're doing. Headaches, fogginess.
Yes.
I feel like I can't make decisions. Like there are a whole bunch of signs that I know as soon as my body starts to like talk to me, and I'm like, I'm not sleeping well, right? The communication is loud and clear that, Teresa, you need to and I'm like, okay, I just need to get to the end of this week, and then I'm going to avoid doing what I just did, because this is what happens. I start to get too overwhelmed. So when we started off about talking about that you have experienced this sense of lack of purpose and meaning, is that right? Would you say you get to that culmination point and you feel like, wow, why am I doing all of this? Is it more of like an end thing that happens to us that we're like, I don't even know, why I'm doing all of this, or why I've allowed my life to get to this point where now I don't feel like I'm living a life that's on purpose?
It shows up also in the process, not just at the end or in this climax. And within the book, I talk about the stages of burnout, and that's what I have in mind when I sort of hear you speak, because the first stages are actually what I call euphoria. Because in terms of entrepreneurs or new projects, people engaging with new projects, there's this excitement, and they will throw lots of hours at it, but they're not taking care of themselves. But still, they're full of beans. They're running around. They're telling everybody about it. They're getting so much done. It doesn't look like the first stage of burnout, but it is, because that's not sustainable. And as you move down this, it's like a spectrum to, and at the other end, I call it beyond burnout, because, you want if you go to a doctor and you're at this stage, you've probably developed like medical problems that don't look like burnout anymore. It could even be cancer. There's some kind of something organically happening within the body, so there's this spectrum, and somewhere in this spectrum there are always clues, there are always indications. So you're talking about how it shows up within the body, the tension, the tight chest, and other clues are available, often from others. It's like, oh yeah, gosh, are you coming to this meal? You missed the last one also. Are you feeling okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Just want to get on with this project. It's really exciting and fun. So other people, if we're open to it, we can receive the feedback from other people, because they see it before we can often. So just circumstantially, we can sort of like question. It's like, have I eaten all my meals today? I'm pretty sure I might have skipped lunch, or I didn't do that workout that I said that I was going to do. And you might just write it off, but then a pattern develops. You're still feeling okay. This might even be before the aches and the pains start. But but circumstantially or behaviorally, there are clues there. And so it's important that we question, we heighten our awareness, we take some time And this is why, I talk about the value of taking breathers, because it's only in that space that we begin to detect these clues and hear this feedback. Yeah.
And the feedback is so important that I talk about happiness like a compass, that we are always being directed towards our happiest life through the negative, right? That if we didn't have this sense of duality that we have here on this planet, the good and bad, right and wrong, nice, not nice, all of that, that we wouldn't know even what that direction would be if we didn't have that opposition, right? That yin and yang kind of balance again. And so it is, and that is always us being able to choose in every moment the direction towards what is going to make us feel better. But oftentimes we don't check in with ourselves, as you've just stated. And so it's so important for us and I love that when you said just, closing your eyes, how did you call it, about just shutting off the sensory
rest?
Oh, sensory rest. I love that.
Yeah. Because people often confuse rest with sleep. They see it as synonymous with sleep, and yet there are so many different types of rest, from physical rest, where we're not sleeping, but where we're just we're doing something sedate, like I may turn to my art and do something that's more sedate, but it's physical rest. But also mental rest and emotional rest, social rest, not committing ourselves to too many social appointments. It's so tempting to be saying yes to opportunities, but it can be draining for, if we don't put some boundaries in place. And I mentioned the sensory rest, but also creative rest, allowing some space for us to be creative. At the top of our discussion, we were talking about what is an entrepreneur really, and you could define it as a creative person. We've all got that we've all got a creative need, but many of us have careers where we don't indulge that part of us, and we need to allow ourselves to rest into that. And then spiritual rest also. Giving ourselves time to be connecting with something beyond us. And that can just be a walk in the park, a trip to the zoo, But I see all these different types of rest. And, they fall within this idea of breathers, taking breathers. So it's good that we're mindful not to just gravitate towards the same type of rest, but to be addressing it more holistically in terms of, all the different facets of rest. And that's where the magic happens.
Yeah. And all the things that you listed, I feel like those are the things that we could put in what I call our happiness toolkit, where in the toolkit, it has all of these activities that we know help us to connect with a part of ourselves that is always happy, always loving and at peace. And that it's important to recognize that these activities are not providing that happiness, but they are actually a vehicle that's helping us to connect to a part of ourselves that is already at peace and happy. So, for example, you don't have to go to the yoga center, or you don't have to go to the meditation center in order for you to get to your happy place or to feel at peace, because that peace is inside you everywhere that you go. You just have to maybe discover those vehicles that can help you to connect with that, because it's always there. And I think that sensory rest, for me, it is just a matter of me closing my eyes. And often, I'm assuming this kind of posture and just like sinking into that. And I'm like, oh, there's my inner being. There it is. And that inner being is loving me unconditionally. Is always in a state of joy and at peace. And so as soon as I connect with that part of myself, often just through just closing my eyes, that I can do that anywhere, that I'm like, oh, there I go. Okay, I'm connected again. And that it's important that we nurture that part of ourselves, that connection, because then it just, I feel like, overflows into all the other aspects, instead of it being this very like quiet little voice that we call that gut instinct, that intuition, whatever. That little voice is always inside of you, but we often don't make time to hear it or to connect with it. But the more that we do, it then is like that fountain of youth, that magic that you spoke about, that then can overflow into all the other aspects of our life.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It's exciting. As we speak, I can see how all these elements are actually interrelated, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
The sensory rest, the taking breathers, and just tuning into, our intuition, and it's always there. And I hear what you're saying around this within the self. There's always peace there. It's just about coming back into that space, but it's always there waiting for us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, I just want to go back to this sense of meaning and purpose. So we know, like, science has shown, or research has shown, that having a sense of meaning and purpose does help us to feel happier in our lives, and that only 25% of people feel like they're living their purpose. But that's a very small percentage. There's many people that are just feeling like they're going through the motions of life, maybe feeling overwhelmed and burnt out in pursuing the acquisition of things that we think are going to make us happy, which really doesn't. So what are you suggesting in the book to try to get us back on path, so that we do feel like maybe our day-to-day responsibilities, that in some cases we can't get out of just because of the nature of our lives, let's say. So how do we get back to feeling on purpose?
We have to institute. So within the book, there's a system that takes us through a process. And it's important that we do take a sort of like a holistic approach to getting back to that space. And we have to institute things like, putting breathers in place, at the micro level, and also at the meta level, making sure that we have sufficient holidays, but also in our life as well, especially when we're getting up to a certain age with a 0 on the end, just taking time out. Most of us will say that that's not possible, but it is. We have to sort of think creatively as to how we can make that happen. And so, and providing space to breathe and being more aware, awakening to ourselves, but also to others, and questioning. I talked before about goals, sort of discerning between presenting goals and actual goals, so thinking more deeply about what it is that we're working towards. So in this way, we get to sort of make meaning, we get to create purpose, but only after looking inside. We have to sort of like examine what our values are, or where we're up to in life, because often, we set out in life with a particular goal in mind. And maybe even parents have planted the idea of what we should become. And we have to awaken to what we want to become, who we are, so that we can self-actualize. So there has to be space put aside to routinely touch base with ourselves. So other things that I talk about in terms of the process, nurturing ourselves and nurturing the process, making sure that we put routines in place that support us, that don't require that we need to sort of have to spend that much time making decisions. So if we institute the routines and we follow through on them, and so the magic number is around 66 days, if we want to truly embed a routine, a desirable routine or habit, then we need to be pretty damn consistent about it for at least a couple of months. and then it becomes automatic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So much for 21 days.
Well, I suppose it depends what it is. You know, the 66, I think that encompasses a lot of tough nuts to crack, a lot of complex problems or new behaviors. Yeah. 21 days is a great start. But still, it's subject to lots of different variables because it falls within a month. And it could be that, you know, things happen on a monthly basis. I don't know. It could be that, yeah, I don't know. You've got visitors coming, or, you know, you have like a monthly meeting at work where you all go away for a couple of days and you're not able, and so it interferes with the process. So the idea behind a couple of months is you get to negotiate all those other variables that can throw spanners in the work, if you know that expression.
So basically, to realign yourself and to have more balance, it is a process that once we're on one end of the spectrum, that we have to be really tune in and become consciously aware of the life that we're living, and then taking that consistent action and dedication to us living the life that we actually want.
Yes. And when we live that life that we want, you know, taking time to celebrate as well. And, you know, to return to that mountain metaphor, to celebrate climbing the mountain, not just getting to the top, but, you know, the steps along the way. And it's really important that we reward ourselves with something that looks like the ultimate goal. So if the ultimate goal is to have more freedom in our life, like to take a sabbatical, for example, like a year off, then whenever we undertake like these little steps that bring us towards that ultimate goal, it's good that we celebrate with rewards that are actually freedom based. If that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So you wouldn't reward yourself with a chocolate. You would reward yourself with some time off.
Yes.
However small. So it's commensurate with the ultimate goal.
Yes.
And I think that's a trick that most people miss out on. It's a superpower. If we're cognizant of that, then choosing these little micro rewards that look like the bigger reward, and this helps us to be deeply appreciative of the process whilst in the process.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think that oftentimes we're so hard on ourselves that we don't give, pat ourselves on the back for these like maybe little daily 1% steps that in the book Atomic Habits, it says just, making that 1% difference.
Yes.
Moving towards where you're going 1%. Like it doesn't have to be huge, but to acknowledge that you did take that little extra step towards whatever goal it is that you have. So if we're overhauling our life from being at this end of the spectrum, which we can't just all of a sudden, like this is what happens in January, right? People have New Year's resolutions that they're big and grandiose. And then by the end of the month, most people fallen off because the gap between where they are and where they want to be is just so big. So it is so important to do some of the little things that you said on a daily basis that can help us to get through that muck and move us closer towards what that end goal might be.
Yes. I'm a big advocate of napping during the day. And actually, when you look into the science, people who nap, and it's called biphasic sleeping by the scientists, they live longer. And if that doesn't sell it to people, but for practitioners of it, and I've been practicing now for a few years, being the age I am, it just comes naturally to me now, but I do give myself permission for it. And I think you talked before about timetabling it in, giving yourself permission in your diary to, and it need only be 10 minutes. You know, and the Japanese are very good at this. They, you know, taking power naps, and it's a reset. It's you know, anyone that does this routinely knows exactly what I'm talking about. But for those that don't give themselves permission to, and there's a lot of people that sort of say, I'm too busy for this. It's a mind trick, because you're going to be so much more productive if you take 10 minutes to close your eyes and maybe fall into slumber just for a moment, you know, and you'll be so much more productive for the rest of the afternoon.
Wow. And I mean, times that I've taken that, I feel groggy coming out of it, right? I'm like, oh, this has just set me back.
Yeah.
Like when my kids were young, and, you know, you put them down for a nap and you think, okay. And for me, it would take a while to get into that space and to take advantage of the fact that they were napping. And then they might wake up earlier, and then I'd come out of it and I'm like, oh, I don't feel good. But I think many of us, what we'll do is we'll just reach for a coffee, or reach for an energy drink, or reach for something sweet, right? That immediately just, we think peps us up. But maybe what we really should have done is just had like a 10-minute, just allowing us to, you know, sink into that instead of grabbing that coffee.
I think it's interesting when you talk about grogginess, and I felt that, and it's when, and I talk about this a lot actually with my clients. So because I it's almost like I instituted in their routines. I invite it to become a big part of their way of being. So I mention it quite lightly, but I'm quite serious about napping. And when people are groggy after a nap, it's because one of two things: they've napped for too long. Right. So you know, if you're feeling groggy after 20 minutes, cut it right back to 10 minutes and see if you still feel groggy, you know, and then 5 minutes, even if there's still grogginess around, you know. So it's either that you're napping for too long, or you're just going too fast in life, you know, because you should be able to nap and wake up and feel refreshed. If you're not, it's almost like a litmus test. If you can't do that, you need to look around at how your lifestyle. Yeah.
And it could be that we're not sleeping enough, that if you look at this, nap is just like topping us up, right? So if our cup is full and we've depleted it just a little bit that morning through our work, then we have a little nap and then it's full again. But if we're not sleeping at night, then that cup is empty. We've gone into work with it like this full, and then we've done a little nap, but then we're feeling it's because this cup was not full.
Yes.
I feel like that's what you're saying with that.
Yeah. So actually, when we put it like this, it's a win-win. Even if you feel groggy, because there's learning there for you, it's telling you that you're not getting enough sleep, or your lifestyle is just too hectic, because you should be able to nap and wake up and feel refreshed.
Right. Good point. I'm going to try that. Because that I was not. I was grabbing the coffee, I'll be honest with you. I was having the afternoon espresso. So I'll have to try to just see how that goes. Do you put a timer on it then? Like for 10 minutes so it wakes you up?
But for anybody, I would say no more than 20. No more than 20. If you need more than 20, you need to be looking at other parts of your life. But to aim for something under 20, but put a timer on it so that you know, you're not because that's all you need. You know, it's like with the sensory rest. You might find that you get what you need just by closing your eyes for a minute. You know, so becoming super aware of, you know, how our body responds and how our mind responds. You know, and tuning into what we're needing on a daily basis. Yeah,
it's awesome. Now, I love through our discussion today that we were able just to highlight those very like small little tweaks that we can implement right away, and just implementing these that we can start, pretty much right after our conversation today. So I really thank you so much for allowing us to have time with you and your expertise to share parts of your book with us and these very simple hacks, let's call them, that we can implement to really start to bring our life back in alignment.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Yeah, free to all, huh? Everybody can practice them right now if we only give ourselves permission to do so.
Yeah. Now, Dr. Matt, if people want to connect with you after the show or grab a copy of your book, how can they do that?
Best place to go is through our website, and that's the Mind Institute, all one word, .at. So that's AT, yeah, Alpha Tango.
Okay.
So yeah, themindinstitute.at.
Awesome. And then your book, there's a link there where they could grab that as well.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Okay.
And for anybody that buys the book, I'd really appreciate you. Feel free to send me an email and to let me know your thoughts. I very much see it as an opportunity to be connecting with you, not just in a passive way, but maybe even in a collaborative way, because I think this book is going to see many additions, and I'm wanting to sort of add different layers over the years with people's stories and experiences. So yeah, feel free to reach out and email me any thoughts that you have about it, how it's impacted you.
That sounds lovely. Now, Dr. Matt, again, thank you so much for being on the show with us today and sharing with us the ways that we can bring our life back into balance so that we can ultimately be happy.
Welcome, Teresa. Thank you so much for having me.
I'd like to leave you with the thought for the day. If we are going to be happy, living a balanced life is essential. When we are imbalanced, we experience feelings of discontentment, restlessness, and inner turmoil. We may also feel a sense of lack of disconnection from the world. We lack a sense of purpose, or there's a constant yearning for something more profound. This inner and outer chaos, stress, and unease indicate that we are disconnected from our true selves and original nature, which is always loving, at peace, and happy. When we prioritize our connection to our spiritual self, we acknowledge that nurturing every aspect of our existence is vital for holistic growth and fulfillment. Practicing spiritual well-being has us cultivating inner peace and tranquility, irrespective of our external circumstances. This inner peace acts as an anchor, providing stability and strength to navigate life's challenges with equanimity. When we live in balance, we become more receptive to divine guidance, intuition, and the signs that guide us toward our unique path. We begin to recognize the interconnectedness of all beings and gain a sense of purpose beyond our individual day-to-day responsibilities. Our spiritual connection nourishes us, strengthens our resilience, and provides solace during difficult times. Whether through prayer, meditation, contemplation, or other spiritual practices, balance allows us to tap into a wellspring of wisdom, guidance, and unconditional love. Through balance, we embark on a transformative path that integrates the sacred and the mundane, leading to a more meaningful, fulfilling, and joyful life. I invite you to check out my services on my website at teresagreco.ca for more information about my coaching, workshops, and motivational speaking opportunities. You can connect with me through my website, on my Instagram page at TeresaGreco_Steps to Happiness, or my Facebook page, Steps to True Happiness with Teresa Greco. Thank you so much for joining me on the Happy Hour with Teresa Greco. Keep smiling and be happy.